everybody to another edition. We're back. It's the Orange Bloods Texas football YouTube channel. We took the weekend off, because it's July and stuff. And in a couple of months, there will be no days off. Like maybe we'll get Sunday, but in reality, that doesn't even sound like a realistic thing. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. Hit the like button, subscribe, do those things that we beg of you every single day. And I'll be honest, once we get to like 50,000 subscribers, I won't beg like a little fat kid trying to get in the front of the line and get a piece of cake at a birthday party. I will not do that, Anwar. But for now, I'm a fat kid with a little dream of a cake the entire time we're doing these videos. How are you?
Was that like the Eminem thing where you diss yourself so then no one else can have anything else to say afterwards?
Well, I wasn't really dissing myself.
Okay.
I was just saying I'm going to act like a beggar, but that doesn't feel like a diss as much as like an acknowledgement of the truth.
Okay.
It's like I'm a whore for the likes and the subscribes. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Okay. I will not be that person.
I don't know where we're going with any of this. I want to get out of it. I'm doing good. I don't know where. I have no clue where we're going, but I'm doing good. Good weekend, hanging out with the boys. To your point, this is like we're getting towards like the last kind of like weekends where you kind of like kiss the kids and like, all right, I'll see you in December because we got Big 12 Media Day starting up. We didn't have it last year. And then, we get to have a chance to get that thing started. So kind of looking forward to see what this whole week is going to entail.
It is a Monday overreaction show. That is what we do on Mondays. I'll give you an overreaction on the Big 12 Media Days that hasn't even occurred yet. Okay.
Hit me.
Like I'm already dreading, the SEC plays all these conference, like you realize, set your watch. There will be SEC football coaches on ESPN on the day that the Big 12 Media Days start. Mm-hmm. They can be on anytime they want during the summer. They could come on next week, but they are going to be on for both of the days. It'll be like the car wash with about 18 different SEC coaches. And look, I realize that the Big 12 has learned they also can play that trick to some extent. And I'm sure we'll see Steve Sarkisian and maybe even Lincoln Riley do the exact same thing. I don't know how many of these other dudes that ESPN really wants coming through their studios, if I'm being completely honest. But I feel like we haven't had it in 2 years, Anwar, and yet when it returns, it will fit like a glove, and that all of the things that people will bitch about during the Big 12 Media Days, the least of which isn't the Big 12 itself. Because you hear from some of these players and you're like, I don't even know who these dudes are. And you're just let
me ask you a question. I put this in my column, right? Let me ask you a question, okay?
Yeah.
If we put all the conferences together and it was a music festival, right?
Oh, damn.
What time slot is the Big 12? Because we know the SEC is like
so funny.
Is like the midnight, like 11 o'clock SEC. What time does the Big 12 come on stage? They're not the 3 o'clock local band, right?
Well, it depends. Are we putting them on the main stage?
Okay, yeah. Everyone gets
if you go to like ACL or something like that, they have multiple stages, and you have to choose which stage you want to go visit.
One stage. Let's do one stage.
I mean, it's daylight.
So like 6 o'clock?
No. I said it's daylight.
So right after like the local band, right?
Yeah, I mean, no. Well, look, the Big Ten's getting a better spot than the Big 12 in this world where we're all sharing the same stage. Pac-16 goes first. They're the local band.
Okay.
I mean, people are setting up. They're just, they're that show where if you have a camera shot out wide, you can just see people walking by, not paying attention. The Big 12 is like that second group that comes on. And now there is a smattering of people who have their blankets and they're hanging out and they came for the show. Clemson's in the ACC. And as long as Clemson's in the ACC, Clemson gets treated like a big band. So their part in the lineup's a little better. Same with the Big 10 or whatever the hell they call that conference now. There's like 45 teams in it. This will just be that week where everybody's reminded that they don't really like the Big 12. Texas fans will say they hate Lincoln Riley's face, but then they'll be like, well, he's good. Why won't he go to the NFL already? Isn't that the thing that's most surprising about Big 12 Media Day in 2021? Not that we're having an actual Big 12 Media Day, but if I had told you 2 years ago that Lincoln Riley would still be at Oklahoma and that they would have won 2 more Big 12 championships and that the NFL would covet him the way they have. I mean, he would have, if he wanted an NFL job, he would have an NFL job.
Yeah.
And he's still at Oklahoma. And what makes the Lincoln Riley thing so interesting for me, and I don't mean for us to completely go into an OU discussion. They'll get that when it's their day at Big 12 Media Day. When you're there, like we'll have on the site coverage of all of this.
We'll go live. We'll go live on those days. Make it easy.
We will.
Yeah.
And you look at Lincoln, and he is the rare big look because Urban Meyer thirst traps for the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, look at where he is now and look at how he begged for the Cowboys job a year ago. I think Lincoln Riley could be the Cowboys coach if he'd wanted it. Really do. I think they would have hired him 2 years ago. I really believe that. And he's just turned those jobs down. And when he first started becoming a problem for Texas, I think Texas fans thought, well, it's all right. He's awesome, but that level of awesome doesn't stay in college football very long. I mean, Christ, Cliff Kingsbury still got a job. And that guy doesn't deserve to have his name mentioned in the same sentence with Lincoln Riley. So I don't know, like Big 12 Media Days begin this week, and it's impossible. It's impossible to avoid, I think, the same. That's my overreaction, is that I'm already tired of all of the complaining that will occur on Big 12 Media Day. People are going to be mad that ESPN isn't doing wall-to-wall coverage. They're going to be mad that they're not going to be able to probably find the Steve Sarkisian press conference the way they want to, right? Where's the Longhorn Network? Like, we're just going to get all of the same things. And we'll talk about them in real time. I just want to acknowledge beforehand that the Big 12 Media Day is one of those things that we do because we have to. There's nothing else going on. We've been waiting for something football to happen to give us a reason to have live coverage of things. Like all of that stuff is true, but it is a very time-honored tradition that those things are forgotten 5 seconds after they've ended.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was trying to think when I wrote my column on this past Sunday, that's on Orange Bloods. I was trying to think of what's some of the most memorable Big 12 moments that I've seen in my 7 years on the beat. And I really couldn't think of one. I stretched it. Like, and there was a couple little things, but there was nothing that really, stood out. And to your point, it's like, you're going to see ESPN with wall-to-wall coverage of SEC media days like that. You're just going to see that. And like when the Big 12 gets started on Wednesday, to your point, Bob Bowlesby would kick it off and everyone will start talking shit about Bob Bowlesby, right?
Yep. And perfect.
That's where it starts with, oh, what is he talking about? Oh, he's this and that. Like, it's going to start there.
You are so right.
Yes, it starts with Bowlesby. If he's going to say something that's going to piss off everybody, or not say something that's going to piss off everyone. And
He's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. It doesn't matter what he says.
Nothing that he says. Whether someone may ask him about conference expansion, he's going to say why they're not going to expand. Someone's going to be pissed off about that. Or if he says they're going to be expanding, going to be pissed off about that. You're right. It does become really kind of a real of a bitch fest. But the problem is, and this is the issue, is because Texas isn't Texas at this moment. And the moment Texas becomes Texas, then this becomes a relevant conversation. Right now it's OU. And right now, the other big story right now is Iowa State. Like that those are the big stories. It's going to be, can Campbell get Iowa State over the hump? And again, I talked about it in our last one, but there was 4 writers who think that Iowa State is the number 1 team in this conference. And so there's people out there that may think that Iowa State can knock off OU. And I was on a radio station where there was a former Iowa State quarterback who was talking about, he's like, we're not scared of this team. We beat them before, so on and so forth. So we'll see what that happens. And then there's Texas, and it's going to be a lot of, how do you make this work? How do you make that work? How do you make this work? How do you fit these things in? Who's going to be a quarterback? But it's until Texas gets to that point where they're in this conversation as one of the top teams in the league, then it just becomes, it's OU, Lincoln Riley, maybe someone else. And then, there's Texas, which is to technically should be the headliner. But right now they're just not at this moment.
Yeah, and this probably looks a little different last year with Sam Ehlinger being a senior. You know what I mean? Because I was just about to say these things are often remembered most by whose quarterback's able to show up.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to be who did we talk about last week that's not bringing their quarterback? Is it Oklahoma?
Oklahoma isn't bringing their quarterback. I think it was TCU is bringing
They're bringing Max Duggan.
They're bringing Duggan. I'll look it up. I feel like K-State is bringing theirs as well.
Iowa State's going to bring Purdy, I'm guessing, right? Or are they bringing Breece Hall?
They're bringing Hall.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll tell you, hold on, give me 1 second. I'll tell you who's here. Okay. Yeah, from the quarterback conversation, K-State is bringing Skylar Thompson. OSU is bringing Spencer Sanders. And the other quarterback that's going to be there would be Max Duggan from TCU.
That is the worst collection of quarterbacks that any conference has ever sent to conference media day. Ever.
Wow, you're going to be on someone's bulletin board.
Ever. Wow. Those dudes are all Jags. And look, I realize they got to send people. I get why Kansas State is sending Skylar Thompson, although their best player is Deuce Vaughn. I don't care that he is a sophomore. If they really wanted some attention and weren't just playing favorites with an older player, sending a bad quarterback,
I hate that rule, by the way.
I
hate that. I hate that just send your best guys.
Yes.
It's like you have Bijan coming, right? Right. So for Texas, and I get it, he's a sophomore, but he's one of your best players. And Keandre happens to be a senior, but just send your best guys.
Arguably their best defensive player. I mean, Coburn, you could make the case if, you could absolutely, I probably would say of all the people that I would have put on a first team all Big 12 on the Texas defense, I might have gone Coburn slightly ahead of Jamison, but I think they're roughly the same. The conference as a whole, you want to talk about why the conference probably won't get much attention at Big 12 Media Day. We just outlined it. It's the name recognition. There's nobody there that's an all Big 12 candidate, let alone one of the best players in the Big 12. I'm just talking about at the quarterback position.
Gotcha.
That's the thing that gets people to really quarterbacks talk. They're like E.F. Hutton. People listen. The Big 12, that Oklahoma isn't sending not Spencer Sanders, but not sending Rattler is interesting to me because he is the presumed number 1 pick in next year's NFL draft. There won't ever be another Big 12 Media Day that he gets to represent if his career goes the way I think a lot of people think it is, which is big season this year. head off to the NFL, where at worst he's probably a top 10 pick. At worst. Because there is some NFL teams know get your quarterback in the first round if you can get him. Brock Purdy. The best two quarterbacks in the Big 12 are on the best two teams, and neither team is sending their quarterback. It's interesting. And I don't begrudge Iowa State. Like, Breece Hall is the man. And just like Bijan being there, you can absolutely justify that. He's their best player, but I think I'd much rather hear from Bryce Purdy. No. And you haven't even told me who Oklahoma's bringing on offense. I don't care. I want to hear from Spencer Rattler, period.
Yeah, they're bringing Jeremiah Hall, tight end / halfback.
Are they trying to get people not to watch? Is that the goal? Is the goal, who could we possibly send that nobody wants to talk to? Are you serious? That's bad. If I'm the Big 12, I can't even let that happen. You're sending who? Do you realize we are lacking star power? We have potentially the number 1 pick in next year's NFL draft available. You're sending who?
Yeah, they said Jeremiah Hall, Nick Bonito, will be their two representatives.
Hey, you send Rattler and Bonita to a conference media day, and it's like, holy shit, they got some badass dudes on their team, don't they? Like, that is a playoff level team. When you roll those two guys out, that Oklahoma's not doing it. I don't know. Maybe they just don't want Rattler to have the attention. He's already got the endorsement deal. Maybe they didn't want him talking about that. I think the most interesting conversation in all of this is to talk to these dudes about what their NIL experience has been like. I want to know about the videos they've been cutting. I want to know, has anybody actually contacted you and offered you legitimate money to do something yet? Because, our subscribers think that Texas is just doing nothing. They think that they're just letting everybody beat them to the punch. Bijan Robinson is the most marketable guy in this football program. What's it been like for him? I almost don't care if anybody asks anything else. I'm absolutely fascinated with Bijan, what it's been like for the last couple of weeks. And is he surprised by, like, he got that deal with Raising Cane's? I don't even know if Raising Cane's is paying him. And if they are, I don't know that maybe we don't find out those type of things. I don't know how that works, but I don't know. He did like one Instagram post with like a half-hearted, good to be partnered up. And it just didn't sound like the kind of thing. I don't know. I'm waiting for something to make me go, oh, okay. Now we're seeing the full power of this whole idea, and it hasn't happened yet. And it's more interesting than anything else they're going to be talking about.
So one of the things I was going to ask you was, like, is there anything, Ketch, from like a coaching perspective? Like, is there any coach that you want to hear from? Do you want to hear what Gary Patterson says, or Mike Gundy, or Campbell, or Riley? So it's like, is there anything that one of these coaches that you say, like, well, if I hear that, like, I would feel pretty good, or I would be accomplished? Or is that a no-go? Because you're thinking, you can't think of anything.
I want to hear what Gundy has to say about NIL, because that could be a disaster. I mean, really, he is one of these guys. It'll be one of the things, Dabo, when he goes to ACC media days, Dabo once was like, I'll quit if players are ever paid. I mean, I would imagine that's a question that he's going to be asked. And considering how high profile Clemson has been in promoting their NIL brand, I think Clemson has been as on the front foot with promoting their own version of a leverage program as Texas has been. And it's not what Dabo was saying publicly. So I think all of these coaches, there's a question of like, hey, it's now that we haven't talked to you since this happened. So, penny for your thoughts. And I think look, that will be the main news at Big 12 Media Day.
Yeah.
It's the first conference, if I'm not mistaken, to have media days. And
check it out.
The comments from these coaches about the NIL will be the things that the think columns from the national football writers that actually show up. Those will be the pieces I think that get written.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I'm looking up. I know SEC starts. It looks like, if I'm correct here, if SEC starts on the 19th, so that would be next week. But hold on, I'm getting on Saturday down south to see when everyone is. Filibuster for me for a second, Catch.
Well, I think the SEC always goes the week after the Big 12.
Yeah.
I believe.
So Big 12 is this week. It looks like ACC is July 21st through the July 22nd. Pac-12 is doing it on July 27th.
Oh, they're all going later.
Yeah.
Wow, the Big 12 is just coming out early.
Yeah, Big 10 is July 22nd to the 23rd. And the SEC is July 19th. So it's the Big 12 this week, and then everyone the following week and the week after.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no question in my mind the big topic this week will be NIL. I think that those will be where the sound bites come from. And I think, look, I'm halfway interested to see what a sizzle reel of all 10 coaches talking about the NIL sounds like.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a couple of guys that are going to be like, this is fantastic. Happy for my players. I bet there's going to be a few coaches that might make fun of how little has happened. Maybe Cameo makes a cameo and it's the wrong kind of cameo. Although maybe if you're Cameo, any kind of cameo is a good cameo.
You and I could do cameos if you wanted to, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. And
then I think we're going to hear from at least one or two guys that lets loose. And maybe the SID of that school is going to prep the coach in advance and say, Coach, whatever you do, don't kill your recruiting. Don't alienate your players. Just if you don't want to say anything, don't say anything. But don't go off. Don't be the headline.
Correct.
And I kind of feel like there could be a Gary Patterson or Mike Gundy kind of filibuster laying in the weeds. Mike Gundy feels like the kind of guy who will start who's going to tell him in Stillwater to not say something?
Nobody.
Yes.
Nobody. I mean,
that's my point.
And the great thing about Gundy is he's so dry about the stuff that he says, but he's so witty about it too. Because you're right. The only other thing that you worry about, the only other big, the other big talking point for every Big 12 media day is Mike Gundy's mullet. Like that. Yeah. That's always the length of it. How long is it? You know what I'm saying? Coach, you've been growing it out. Right? How's it look? Is it illustrious? And he'll say something funny and witty, and and that will make the rounds. And that's probably been the biggest highlight over the last few years. So
again, Anwar, you've lived it. So that's why you've been more right on this video than I have been. Because you're speaking of personal experience. You've nailed it a couple of times. Yes, the Gundy mullet thing. There will be people who won't be able to help themselves, tripping over themselves to get some mullet commentary in there. And I don't know, it feels belittling. I don't know,
it is. So yeah, he's probably the one that may say something about NIL. But I think you raise a really, really great point, which is no matter how they feel personally, that cannot be what they say publicly. They have to be all chips on board. And realistically, Catch, if I'm one of these coaches, I'm coming with stats because I want to sell this program. And I'm saying my program has 23 NIL deals. We've done such and such and such. If you can work on some financials, potentially say, the potential to make X amount of money, have someone project it. No one will ever check the facts, but to me, you sell that, hey, our school does this with NIL, and that's why we're badass. And then now let all the recruits get a chance to hear it, let that circulate, have your departments come up with your clips that you put on your social media. So you put it on your Texas media. We're giving them great ideas, by the way, Ketch.
Anwar, somebody's going to be old man, get off my lawn guy. And I can't wait. Because you know why? You put a recruit in front of these dudes and they are Meg Ryan in the middle of When Harry Met Sally, right? They are orgasming in front of everybody in the front of the kitchen, and I'll have what she's having. That is who college football coaches are when there's a recruit nearby. But take the recruit away and just they hate the media. So the media shows up. They're less like Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally, and they're more like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. They're sitting up there and they're mad, and they're just waiting for they're waiting for Tom Cruise to ask that one question that's going to get that one reaction. And honestly, it's up to the Big 12 media to make that happen. All these dudes want to go off. They all want to be old man, get off my lawn. This is a bunch of BS. But they can't.
Yeah. It will be, you're damn right to order the code red, right? I mean,
yes.
That's what you want. But like you said, who's going to do it? Like the likely stuff, you might give Gary Patterson. He doesn't really give a damn, and no one at TCU is going to tell him what to do.
Gundy's my guy. Gundy's even money.
Who is?
Gundy is even money.
Yeah, Gundy's
because he don't care about recruiting. He ain't trying to get 5 stars anyway. He is trying to get low maintenance 3 stars because he has figured his stuff out. He knows how to run his program. He knows how to have success with his guys. So he ain't trying to impress nobody.
But outside of that, I mean, okay, so maybe Gundy on NIL to see if he says something. Sarkeesian, what about him? What do I asked you this on our Slack channel over the weekend? But what do you want to take away from Sarkeesian? What do you want to come away knowing? Like, what if Geoff Ketchum said when we do our live show on Thursday? What does Geoff Ketchum wants to hear Sarkeesian say that you're like, okay, I feel a little bit, I know a little bit more about this thing?
I think there's a couple of things. I think first off, you and I have this conversation every year. And to Tom Herman's credit, last year, he finally answered this question during the pandemic, which is define what in advance before this season takes place, what represents a successful season for Texas? Because it's hard as a couple of sideline spectators who get paid to talk about these things. I think it's really hard for us to pinpoint how we should label this season. And this isn't a Big 12 in a year where you say anybody could win it, which was probably a year ago. It's a Big 12 where it feels like nationally everyone believes there are 2 teams separate from it. It feels like the coaches and the media feel the exact same way. There's a clear 1 and 2 in this conference right now. So a third place finish is kind of meeting expectations for what people probably have for you. But what does this program need? What does he demand of this program this season? And it'll be interesting to see if it's a set of demands that he's never met in his career as a head coach, right? Like win 10 games, get to a major bowl game, make it to he hasn't done those things yet. And it's not all his fault. I mean, you can't look at what he did at Washington and say, well, those were the expectations that should have been placed on him. And he wasn't at USC long enough for there really to been a judgment on where that program was going before he kind of ran his own self out of there. So I want to know and Charlie got in trouble with this question, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we're not winning a national championship this year. People clutched their pearls as if he had said the C word in front of them.
Yeah.
How dare Charlie say that a team that ended up being 6-7 on the year wasn't going to play for a national championship? So Steve will know that there's a fine line between being really honest and there's a projection. And then I think so there's the expectations for this season. He's not going to say anything about the quarterback position. I want one person to ask about the quarterbacks, and then I want everybody else to leave it the hell alone. He is not going to say anything. He's just not. Because he knows that that's the one thing that he could say that would be a headline, and he ain't trying to create quarterback headlines. He's going to just be very vague.
Correct.
I want to know where he thinks the program is 7 months into his tenure and what he's either surprised or not surprised by, because his recruiting is stagnant. He's not landing the big time players yet. And I'm curious to hear how much of that is a surprise, how much he feels like that's part of the process. And he may say, look, we got a lot of same thing that Charlie would have said back in 2014, which was, we got a bunch of dudes in front of us. We're not worried about recruiting. In the end, you watch, we'll get ours. That was kind of Charlie's response. And you know what? He ended up being right.
He was right.
To Charlie's credit, they finished like gangbusters. I don't know that I can completely make it all make sense because some of it was very serendipitous. Like it took A&M really dropping the Malik Jefferson ball in order for Texas to get Malik. But hey, man, to the victor go the spoils. Charlie got Malik Jefferson. I'm curious. The thing is, I'd love to hear Sark state how he feels because Texas fans are stressed. I guess that's the thing. Like you go on Orange Bloods right now and people are stressed about recruiting and they're stressed about the reality that if this program doesn't play good football early on, they don't have a clean month of September, if they don't have a signature victory, if they don't win 10 games, they don't play in the Big 12 championship game, if they don't hit some pretty lofty, I think, goals and targets, they're worried that next year's recruiting is going to look a lot like this year's recruiting, which has really seen Texas struggle to get the biggest of the big guys to commit. And when they have, recently they've lost them. So they got Evan Stewart to commit, but he decommitted. So he could have been the best, highest rated prospect in this class, but he was like, too early, need to look around. Reuben Owens, at the time of his commitment, there were people talking about him being the number one running back in the country and a candidate for the number one. His headline made ESPN's number one headlines on their website. That's no easy task for a sophomore in high school to be on the lead set of headlines. Well, he decommitted. And now there's a lot of thought that he could be committing, that A&M may be his favorite. Where does Sark think he is? What does he think needs to happen for this thing to really take off? I think it's a different answer than the speech he would have given in January when he was hired. I think in the spring when he coached spring football, it's a different answer. And I think if he's asked that question and he gives a fake sounding answer that doesn't make it clear that that fans want to just hear him say, I understand. And this is what we've got to do. It's an acknowledgement of what they already know. And I think you will see some Texas fans murmuring if he downplays where they are and goes with the company line of, we'll get who we're going to get and we're not worried. It's hard for me to believe that he would be this deep. Cameron Williams and Kelvin Banks, that just happened.
Yeah.
That just happened. And Kelvin Banks is arguably the most important player in this class. I'm just curious to see how he answers the questions. He's not, look, I think there's some fans who are under the misconception that talking about the difficulties of this job is the same as putting him on a hot seat. Because I think there are people who think that fans and other people are trying to put Sark on a hot seat. And it's like, well, this job stays hot all the time.
Yes.
That's why
no cool off. No cool off.
Ever. Even when you win, do it again. And, Texas went 5-7 the year after it played in a national championship game, and Matt Brown fired his entire staff.
Yeah.
These were guys that took him to the mountaintop nearly. And then he was like, the next year, what have you done for me lately? This is just a job where that's like that. So
Tom fired his staff. Tom fired the majority of his staff after a winning season, And it's so interesting what you're saying, Ketch, because, when you start, it's interesting. This job doesn't accept you being good. They want you to be great. Tom Herman was good.
He was.
Okay? You could say he was good. He had 50-32, 4 straight bowl wins, 2 top 5 recruiting classes. You could say he was good, but that's not what you're hired here at Texas to be. You're hired to be great. You're hired to, he only went to 1 Big 12 championship game. That's not enough. There's no Big 12 victories. That's not enough. And OU, by the way, keeps stacking trophy after trophy. Texas fans don't want to see that. So to your point, when you started off with definition of like success, what Tom wanted to say was, it's not always defined by wins and losses, right? He said you can have a successful season and maybe not go to the Big 12 championship game. And he defined it for us prior to last season, but that wasn't good enough, because if it was just about being good, well, 7-3 is good, right? I mean, who's going to be pissed off about 7-3? And then you can rationalize and tell yourself, well, Kansas got taken off the schedule. That's 8 wins right there.
But see, this is when to ask the question, because when we did the Facebook Live show and you held it with Tom Herman, that was my question.
Yes.
And I gave him every opportunity to back away and say, Geoff, you're wrong. It's a different day and age. Your bar for success is too high. But when we did that, Tom acknowledged, because this is when he thought his team was going to be good enough to do this. Tom acknowledged that any season where Texas football doesn't win a conference championship and or play in a major bowl game, if that doesn't happen, season's not a success. He agreed with that. And then when we got into last season, the finish line moves a little bit, but I'm okay with that. I know why Herman would do it when it's clear they're not going to be in the Big 12 championship game, or when he loses the Iowa State game and he's trying to save his job and to like make it clear, hey, I'm good. Even if I'm not great, I am good. But when you're not great, you get treated like you're shit at Texas. I mean, Shaka Smart's good. He may not actually be damn good. I mean, I'm not even going to fight that battle today, right? He might just be good, but rightfully so, Texas fans don't want to hear about good. And the last thing I'll say about this, Anwar, when you arrived at Orange Bloods 8 seasons ago.
Thank you. You got it right. Got it right. Got it right. Finally.
Yeah, baby.
Don't you cut the checks? How do you not know this?
When you do the years, when it's the moment you start having kids. You came 8 seasons ago. My kids are almost 7.5. You do the math.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember anything that happened in like 1993. I have a hard time remembering the order of things in the last 7 years. When you arrived, I was just thinking about this at the very beginning of this of this show that we're doing. The Big 12 looked a lot different because we had gone through this stretch from 2010 through 2014 when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and Baylor and TCU, they had all had their hand on the mantle and they had all touched the top. Every one of those teams tasted that Big 12 championship success to some degree. And then Oklahoma went on the run. And I think that one of the big Texas football problems that exist that they'll never want to just come out and admit, because they don't want to admit that Oklahoma's been better than them by a lot, but Oklahoma's been better than them by a lot. And it makes it, it's like trying to tell an Auburn fan how good your football program in the midst of Alabama. It's a perfect example. Auburn's got a really good football program, but they got to fire coaches and shake things up and put guys on the hot seat because of who they're surrounded by. Because the school right down the road is having an all-time great run of success. And Texas's most recent failures, last half decade or so, coincide with Oklahoma going on an unprecedented, as good as Bob Stoops had been and as much success as he had, they'd never done the 6 in a row thing. And, anybody that thinks I'll cut the guys in the state of Iowa a little slack who might have homered it up and went with Iowa State. Hell, I picked Texas last year in Sam Ehlinger's senior season just because he was a senior and OU had a guy that had never played before. And I get the benefit of the doubt. Like, I understand sometimes making that mistake. So I get someone from the state of Iowa believing in Iowa State. Everybody else knows Oklahoma's been the daddy. So,
yeah,
that has to change. And until it does, I mean, remember the look on Charlie Strong's face when he beat Oklahoma?
Yes. Yes.
They know how important it is. They know how they're judged. And, it is what it is until Texas gets over that problem that they have. Anyway, that's all I got. You got anything else on a Monday? We've ranted more than I would have guessed.
No. The last thing on the OU thing was the one thing they've done really good is obviously the quarterback thing. Like that, that's always to your now in that our Bijan Robinson conversation, and you're saying when the running back doesn't matter, and sometimes now if you want to say just look at OU string of quarterback play and how that coincides with their success, you're absolutely correct. One of the last things that I know people. I won't have this thing go off the rails. So let me just ask you a yes or no question. You think the Eyes of Texas gets brought up in Big 12 media days?
No.
So you think that's closer towards the season?
Nobody from the Texas media is going to ask that. I don't believe.
Okay.
And maybe, but I mean, I can't say on a 1 to 10 scale of certainty that I would put it at 10 that it's a no, but I'm probably like at a 6.5, 7 that it doesn't get asked. I feel like, because by the end of the season, that had been put to bed as it relates to the football team and the program. And so I just don't think it's on the radar, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Last thing, let's end it on a fun note. Okay. You at one time were a huge MMA guy, huge. And used to have updates in your column every week. I think you do it not as much because you're a soccer guy now. Like you're 100. I think all that energy has gone into soccer.
Oh, I was never that big of an MMA fan.
You seem to be. I thought you were. I mean, you would have sections of your column devoted to it.
I'm just telling you. Well, yeah, in my UFC never gets an entire, never once.
Okay.
Got its own chapter. It gets like throwaway lines, even at the height of but you want to ask me about Conor? Because
Did you watch the fight? Did you watch the fight this weekend?
Man, I'm not putting money into that racist hands. I ain't got no time for Conor McGregor. I was glad to see that he got hurt. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but I was hoping he was going to get put down in that fight. There's nothing about that dude. That's not my steez. I don't roll the way Conor McGregor rolls. And, I have found that most of the Conor McGregor fans that I know, because I used to be a Conor McGregor fan, I liked him as a fighter, and then he just kept revealing pieces about him as a human being that are awful. He did it at Saturday night.
Right after the fight.
Right after the fight, he's talking about some guy's wife and being in her DMs and calling her names, man, that is as low rent as it goes. And if you want my overreaction on a Monday, if you roll with Conor McGregor after everything that he has said and done, what does that say about you? Seriously, ask yourself that question. And maybe in your mind, it says nothing, but that guy's pretty despicable. And he hides it all behind the flash of a character. And you'll forgive me, my days of believing that WWE characters are just characters and they get a get out of jail card for every single horrible misdeed that they do because they're characters. No, man, I'm not about that. So I wasn't going to watch that in any capacity. And oh, by the way, woman beater Greg Hardy was on the card too. So
yeah, but he went night pretty quickly though.
And you know what? Good for him too. Yeah. I couldn't put that beat down on him. I mean, if I ever said any of the things that I believe about Greg Hardy to Greg Hardy, he'd probably murder me because he could. Like, he's a big man and has a lot of aggressions and seemingly found a place in the UFC. But what kind of human being would I be to believe the things that I believe in the things in this world that I think are important? Women's safety, right? People think that just because that went down at Baylor that somehow I would turn it off. Man, the UFC really loses me when you partner up with despicable human beings. And the other thing is Conor McGregor's not even good anymore. People paid $100 to watch some dude that's only won one fight in the last 6 years? Come on, man. Come on. We talk bad about, think about the grief that NBA basketball players get every time they don't win a championship, right? Like, think about how Paul George gets murdered. Think about how Giannis has been viewed back-to-back MVPs, doesn't win in the postseason. He wasn't even a candidate for MVP. It was like, oh, we can't take him seriously anymore. That dude hadn't won but one fight in 6 years. And it's still the biggest fight that the UFC has to offer. That's the UFC's problem. They don't have any better or more interesting fighters. And because of that, they still have to do business with guys like this. I just rather put my money elsewhere.
Hit the like and subscribe button, folks.
I'll beg you. I promise. We'll talk tomorrow.
Who knew? I didn't know this would happen, but there it is.
Boom. Roasted. Later.